This is the Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast, a show that brings you marketing stories, tips, hints, and much more. A treat for those who want to succeed in business or marketers who just want to learn.
Hello, Alex.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, considering I don't have the ability to be able to party and not have hangovers, and I'm almost halfway through the week and still have a hangover from the weekend. So, this is my learning. I still party when I go for a party. I don't party that often, but when I party, my brain thinks I can still do it like when I was 21. And then when I wake up in the morning and a few days later, I realized that that's just not true anymore.
I was told by a mentor that alcohol is the joy of the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that as we get older.
Yeah, just it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. And I know that, and I know it very, very well. But
You'll do it again.
I completely forget. And I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. And then the next day, no, I can't do this. I don't want to ever do it again. The classic regret, but then the short memory that we have. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Before we started doing our podcast, which I guess is probably about a year and a half now, I think.
Yeah.
Had you ever done a podcast before?
I've been a guest on a few podcasts.
That's what I mean. Had you been a guest before?
Yeah, I think 2 at that stage. I've been a guest on 2 podcasts.
So when you were first asked to go on a podcast, what was your immediate reaction?
Probably, oh no. What will I talk about? Fear and a little bit of pride, to be asked. I think there's something about someone asking you to be on their podcast that's a little bit like, oh, they picked me, right? I mean, they don't have to tell you that you were a desperate last choice because someone bailed, but
Yeah.
it's still quite nice. Have you been a guest on a podcast?
No. I've been invited a couple of times, but I didn't make it onto the podcast, not because I didn't want to, but just logistically, just didn't get there in the end.
Okay.
But I haven't actually. I'm still a virgin on the other side of the podcast world.
Well, we've been invited on 2, so
Yeah.
we may need to break that streak of yours.
Yeah. But
on the 2.
what would have made you more comfortable initially? Because a lot of people that we speak to ask on the podcast, they've never been on a podcast before. Even though podcasts are very, very popular and they're everywhere, there's still there's more people who haven't been on a podcast than who have been on a podcast. So just wondering, from your experience of being asked to go on a podcast, from the other side, what made you feel comfortable, and what do you think would have made you feel more comfortable when you were asked to be on as a guest?
That's a good question. The way my brain works is I like knowing the format and the structure. So the one podcast, there was 5 specific questions that were asked to all guests. So I was given those 5 questions and told, these are the 5 questions we're going to ask you. So I knew exactly what I was stepping into. I could prep my answers, know where I wanted to go with it, and it worked. The second one was more an informal chat, so there wasn't as much structure, but I was still given sort of the outline. We'll start with this, and then we'll do that, and then we'll end with this. So I knew what to expect. I definitely think what helped is I did listen. It helps if you actually listen to the person's podcast before you go on. I think a lot of guests make that mistake of not even bothering to hear the format or hear just listen to it so that you know exactly what you're stepping into, right? Because some are more formal, like ours is quite chatty, and we like a good laugh or a joke here and there. And But do, even if it's just one episode, I would say just listen to, so that it's right, that you kind of understand how it's going to flow. And then both of the ones, I knew the interviewer or the podcast host, so that I was comfortable to that degree. It was someone I knew, someone I could talk to. I think it's different when it's a stranger, right? That you going in cold.
Yeah. So I guess it can feel like going into a job interview otherwise.
It depends on the structure, I guess, but yes.
I mean, if you don't know the person and you don't know much about the business, I mean, other than what you've researched, but you haven't been privy to an interview and their
Yeah,
interview style, that's the same as, going into a podcast and not listening to the
yeah.
podcast. It's the same
No,
thing.
you're right.
You're like, oh, I don't know. You
No,
don't
you're
know.
absolutely right. That is like a job interview that you're
Yeah.
not prepped for.
No, not doing
And you hope they've read your LinkedIn profile so they know what to ask you. Don't start asking you
Yeah.
stuff you know nothing about. So Erica,
Yeah.
when you delivered that baby horse, like what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
no, I was gonna start with a fantasy list, a podcast fantasy list, like dead or alive. Like if like who would you like to have dinner with, dead or alive? Um, from a podcast, so just for a little bit of fun, from a fantasy podcast guest. Well, maybe it's not if they're alive, because it's still possible that we could get them on, even if it is Bill Gates. You never know. But dead or alive, who is someone that jumps to your mind? Or maybe three, if you're feeling that creative, that you would love to have a conversation with on Giraffes Don't Eat Steak.
I'm definitely a Steve Jobs fan. So I'm going to put Steve Jobs up there. I just would love to talk about how, his innovation and how he thought differently and his approach, because even though it wasn't directly marketing, it was marketing, and such clever, awesome marketing. And so I think he's up there.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. Because that was in a time where his ideas and beliefs were just way out of whack
It's
with
just
anything that's
out,
going
right?
on. It was, one of the trailblazers, and that would be a really good one. I like that one.
And he just plowed ahead, right? Regardless of all
Yeah,
the rules of the game that he was told he was breaking, right? You're breaking the rules of the game. I just before this was listening to a webinar on tips of good design, because as you know, between us, Alex, you
yeah,
are the designer, not me. So I thought I'd go and listen. And this guy said something interesting. He said that they called brand guidelines, not brand rules, because they are guidelines. And actually, there's a time and place where you have to throw the brand guidelines out of the window and just design from your heart. I thought, that's interesting, because obviously, wherever I've worked, it hasn't been brand guidelines. It has been the brand Bible of you will not break these rules ever, or death, right?
yeah.
That's like interesting. Anyway, I know that's off topic, but just as you were talking about, that's what Steve Jobs makes me think about. He said, no, chuck the guidelines and let's create new ones.
Love it.
Right, number two. No, can you give me one first while I'm thinking? Who's your number one?
Well, I don't know if this really falls into. I don't know why this suddenly popped. I got two actually.
Mm.
The first one that popped to my head. but it's more about creating the brand, and it's around the product of the brand and turning it into something magical. And for me, it's Walt Disney. And so I know you wouldn't necessarily think of Walt Disney as a marketer and his job as a marketer, but let's be honest, a lot of great products are great that have been released by someone. They've been able to capture the world's imagination through some form of storytelling, and which is marketing. And I think Walt Disney managed to capture the attention of the world, from children to adults, with incredible stories and reanimation or animation of existing tales and myths, and turning them into something that everybody could understand and making them accessible. And I think that is probably an example of one of the best storytelling creatives in the world.
Yeah, I
So
agree with that.
So I'd love to, pick his brains around how you can how you can create a story, and also create a story and reuse that story millions and millions of times in different formats. Because if you actually look at a lot of Disney movies, a lot of the story is pretty much exactly the same as other Disney stories, but it's been reformatted and repurposed. So if you can do that with your brand, if you think about, you've got one product, but you're just repurposing that product over and over and over and over and over again with a different front cover, but the inside is exactly the same. For me, that's just absolutely genius. And in fact, with a lot of the productions they used, I've seen some videos where they're doing side by side. It's one movie and another movie completely different, but everything is exactly the same. Like the structure of it, so the structure of the scenery is the same. The structure of the way the characters are moving on the screen is exactly the same. They just have different clothes on, or there's different trees, etc. But just from the kind of initial view, and if you're not doing it side by side, it's like a completely different movie. It's got different music, it's got different voiceover, etc. But it's the same thing. I think that's absolutely genius.
Okay.
The other one is, I don't know who to attribute this credit to, but it's whoever decided to turn Christmas into red, and to turn Christmas into Coca-Cola. I don't know who that was. Do you?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we should know. I don't know. Maybe we can research that and come back to it. But whoever, and maybe it was a group of people, who knows? But I would love to know who that was, and I would love to be in the room or get an account of what happened during that creative period where they came up with a brilliant idea to turn Christmas into Coca-Cola and red, effectively. And maybe that wasn't the exact words they said, but that's what happened, and it was amazing. It was brilliant, and it's still happening today. And there's when you want to make something Christmassy, you make it red. Well, that's brilliant. That's incredible.
Okay.
They're my two.
All right. My second one is much more traditional marketing, is David Ogilvy.
Okay.
Feels like he's the founder of kind of the bedrock of marketing that I studied, that I learned, that I believe. Especially when we were doing like direct mail, like the hard stuff. That's all David Ogilvy, right? How to structure a letter, where to put the call to action, how to grab on the emotions, copywriting genius. I mean, it feels like everyone now says AI does it better, but there's nothing like just going through the customer psychology and just getting that right. And I feel like David Ogilvy would be an awesome one to chat through about that.
Yeah, because I think you're right. There's AI is brilliant in terms of let's say AI effectively is what has already happened, right? Because it it's built upon the knowledge that you put into it up to whatever date it is. So, for example, Ogilvy, up until that date, there was a certain type of marketing, etc., etc., etc. And even if there was AI there, that thought process he had doesn't exist in the AI because the information hasn't been inputted in.
Yeah.
I just need to pause because my computer's about to die. So do a bit of editing. I need to go and grab mine.
So we've had some awesome guests on our podcast, Alex, but we need some more, right? What kind of guests do you think would be good for our podcast? Now we're talking live ones.
Live ones. Well, I think just to start off, I think we've had quite a range of people, right? We've had creatives from photographers to designers to website designers and developers to strategists, PR,
SEO, networking.
We've had a lot. For me, I think what I would like is, I mean, what's the most we've had on one episode? Just the 3 people, right? Yeah. So I would really like to have 2 people on with completely opposing views.
Oh, you want to debate?
Yeah, I would love that. I think that would be really nice. And it could be, well, there was one that we talked about a while ago, would be like AI advocate versus someone who hates AI, for example. That could be quite good. But then I would also love to, have someone who thinks direct marketing is the way that you should be doing marketing, and versus someone who thinks brand is the best thing. I would love to have the chalk and cheese of opinions, marketing opinions, and I think that. So, what area is maybe a little bit less important for me, but what I would just want is 2 people who have completely different views.
Spicy.
I think that's good. I think it's important to be able to hear both sides of something.
Okay. Well, I just like having any different view, right? Everyone we've had on our podcast, I've learned something from, which is what I love. That's what I'm happy is when we're talking to someone and there's an aha moment, right? Or a good reminder of a basic that I've forgotten for a while or something. So anyone who can talk marketing and enjoys talking marketing, please come. I think that would be good for me. I think we're getting some nice range across the whole marketing spectrum. What haven't we touched on? Is there any aspect we haven't really touched on? Paid advertising.
Yeah, we haven't really done that so much, have we?
No, that would be good. Anyone in the PPC space, or we haven't really had that.
I would also, I don't know if this would be allowed by certain companies, but it would be great to have somebody come on and talk about specifically what they're doing for a business, maybe a business that we know of, maybe it's a lesser known business, but someone who can come on and talk about active campaigns that they're working on and why they're doing those kind of things and what they've learned. I think that would be a really interesting one too.
And I mean, the other option is, and I'm like all the new tech stuff that's happening and all the new development, but for someone to come and talk to us about their product or service and how it makes marketing lives better. I keep meeting people who've developed awesome tools or, who've built ways to automate marketing stuff or that. I would love to hear more of that. This could be a nice platform for us to pick it apart, talk about it, see if it works for us, ask questions. That could be another avenue. What's it?
Also very helpful.
What's the word for it? MarTech. Is it MarTech?
MarTech, yeah.
So that's an avenue we haven't really tapped into. Is anyone in the MarTech space to come and talk to us? What's new? I met, what was it, the guy that was doing the drone technology to pick up
Deliveries.
no, to pick up human feelings at events so that it could send more security guards. Did I not tell you about this? Must have been about a year ago. Yeah, he does drones, and he's worked out that he flies his drones over these big events, think Glastonbury or those kind of big events, right? And it basically picks up heat signatures so they can see if people are becoming agitated. So it sends the signal back to the control room, and so they send more security people, because just seeing security people immediately gets people calmed down, right? Like, it's a deterrent. And so that's where it stops more of the incidents happening at these big festivals. And I thought that's fabulous stuff, right?
That's incredible. I mean, are they not, what if you just get hot? I mean, I get very hot very quickly. So
I don't know the tech, you know me. So this is why I'll find him. We'll bring him on. He can come and tell us how it works, because I don't know that. I'm just telling you the concept, and I thought, wow, that was awesome.
That is awesome. There is a hell of a lot of cool tech around. I actually think that we did an episode right at the beginning, though, just as a kind of devil's advocate side of this, that there is probably too much good tech around, and it's overwhelming.
I agree with you, but it's good to keep your eyes open. I'm going to a 2-day conference for InsurTechs because I like seeing what's out there. Yes,
Yeah, I agree.
Don't want to be left behind. I want to know. I want to be
Yeah.
in the loop. It's good there's nothing worse, I think, than being left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing more embarrassing than being in a room full of people who know all about this stuff, and they're talking about it, and you're in marketing and someone says to me, like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But it is impossible to be on top of everything. But at least, have a at least have
And think about it. If we have them all on here, then we can be the go-to for people going, let's go see what the latest MarTech is on Giraffes Don't Eat Steak. So as long as, and we'll quickly find out when we talk to these guys, whether they have a customer focus, right? Because that's our primary focus.
You're a good one to talk about, yeah. And so, okay, if there's any MarTech owners around here listening, give us a shout.
Or anybody, if you want to come on the podcast, if you know someone who wants to come on the podcast, please you can email me, Erica@themarketingdetectiveagency.com. Or if you prefer Alex, he's Alex@themarketingdetectiveagency.com. And just say, hey, I think so-and-so would be awesome. Our format is friendly, chatty. You've seen how we are. We like unpicking. We may ask you some questions just to make sure we understand completely, but we love chatting, anything to do with marketing. So give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you. Right, Alex, until next time.
All right, until next time. Cheers,
Have
Erica.
a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye. That wraps up this episode of Giraffes Don't Eat Steak. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found value in our discussion and got some new ideas to apply to your own business. Tune in next week for another round of marketing insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate you listening. Catch you next time on Giraffes Don't Eat Steak.